Hey everybody, Talk here. I know this is late. Overtime got me again, sadly. Please ignore the smoke. The wind is being random today. And I decided I was going to be outside, because it's actually nice for once in the past month. It's been driving me nuts. So, here we are, part 2 of world building. And I know it's overdue, I'm sorry. But, so, where we left off, we were talking about geography. Let me take my axe off here. There we go. Actually, sit better now. So, we were discussing geography, by and large, multiple ways we could do that. Now, I was being very rambly, not very specific on that one, because they all geography kind of bleeds all together when you design it in multiple ways. Now from here on in, I'm going to go from the mindset of you started with geography, you drew the map, and now you're going to go in that particular direction. So, the next part of this is cultures, as I said it would be. So, cultures are born out of their geography. This is an inescapable truth. You don't have, high plains nomads in a jungle. It doesn't work that way. You can have nomads in a jungle. I can't think of any particular cultures offhand that would generally fit that description. Most forest or jungle dwelling peoples are fairly sedentary because you don't need to roam, because most animals inside of forests and jungles aren't much for roaming. They have relatively preset areas that they remain in. So they stay that way, from the hunter-gatherer state. Now, what really does set your culture is the climate. Your climate dictates what clothes they wear, what food they eat, what animals they can domesticate, if any, and etc., etc. Now, going on the food part, I'm going to show you one of these. You've got to have a staple food. In the case of the Incas, they had a potato. The potato here is what allowed them to exist in such an incredibly inhospitable territory. Because I'm going to be straight with you. Peru isn't the nicest place topographically. Drinking my dog. It's not the nicest place topographically. You're very high. It's very cold. It's not the nicest soil up there. It's just not great all around, but they had I can only call it a thriving empire up there. They did very well for themselves. And it's because of the potato. The potato grew quite well in fairly lousy soil and gives them lots of calories per pound. Honestly, on a per pound basis, you get more calories out of a potato than you do out of grain. It's just grain gives you a lot of carbohydrates and things, which grain gives you other stuff. Potatoes give you vitamin K and lots of calories, which is really good for you. So it helps stretch out your smaller amount of meat or other things. It's very filling for what you get, and it's workable enough. Everyone will just say, oh, it's starch and it's useless. No, starch is necessary in your diet. It's actually quite helpful in various aspects. So they had the potato. Now, you go north, they still get the potato eventually, because they talk to them. Corn. Corn was the rest of America's big, America's two big staple crops are corn and potatoes. You go up north, it's corn. Corn's amazing. Corn does all sorts of crazy stuff. I've talked about that in other videos. Corn is a miracle food because, I'm going to just leave the thing in my hand. You could eat it like this. Now this is field corn, so I would not recommend just gnawing into it because it's hard. This is old. This is very old corn. But now if you take this right off the stalk, generally a little early when it's still got a fair amount of water content in it, it's actually quite soft. You can eat it straight. It's not great. Sweet corn's not actually too bad straight. I'm talking raw here, no butter, no anything. That's generally fine. I still wouldn't necessarily recommend it. Boiling, it's definitely going to taste better. All sorts of things like that. But what you can do with this is, you take this, you can sit there and, I'll just do a little bit. See? Look at how easy that comes off. I just twisted my hand once, and you get all of that in there. And then what you do is, you take this, and I need a pan. On this kit here. There. Now, This isn't actually a pan, this is a plate I'm currently using, actually. There. A pot. So, sitting in a pot now. What you can do is, see my fire back there, you can take this, set it in the fire. I'm not going to right now. I might later, with fresher corn, not that. I'll get seed corn or something from the feed mill, but you can do that, and then it gets parched corn. Now it's nice and dry. I'm still dropping corn. Now, it'll be nice and dry at that point. Now you take that, put that in a mortar and pestle, and you just mash that sucker up. Because if you don't dry this out, this stuff is like a rock. It's very difficult to crush. So what you want to do is get it hot. It'll expand a bit. My dog's being weird. So it'll expand a bit, then you can smash it up and then turn it into a nice fine powder. Now you have cornmeal. Now take your cornmeal and you sift it somehow. The Native Americans, broadly speaking, everybody of course had their own little particular way of doing it, would take a wicker basket, put it in there, and just kind of shake it around. And then you get all the good bits out, and the hull of the corn, that's the stuff that gets stuck between your teeth, that crap, that will stay, not in your teeth, it'll stay in the basket. So you can keep that crap out, and then you just have the nice corn powder. Now, there's a lot of things you can do with that. You can make bread out of it, using literally just water and that. It's not very good. It's very heavy. It's very thick. It's kind of, I've had it. It's not great. It's not nice and airy. It's not nice and poofy. It's not very good. You can put a little bit of molasses in there and it gets way better. Other things, you can cut it with flour. That's what the Europeans would do. They would take it and cut it with flour, and they call it Indian bread. It's much better if you do it that way, because then it's a little thinner. It tastes more like a biscuit. It's very biscuity. It's very good for scooping up mashed potatoes and stuff, which they technically could have had. But that's corn. You can also, if you're desperate, take it, put it in water, and have a corn shot. Oh, no. No. I'm sorry. I have seen enough survivalist YouTubers eat that I don't need to do it myself. I may at some point on this channel, but I ain't doing it right now. But point stands. Corn's a staple food. Grows in a very particular environment. Primarily in North America, you gotta have a particular type of soil. Gotta have a certain amount of rainwater. Does not actually need a lot of rainwater. This is pretty water light, which is quite nice. Potatoes are too. They're not real heavy on water. Now, wheat, barley, things like that, a little more water, still don't need a ton of it. Then you get rice. Rice needs a boatload of water. If you don't have it, you can't do it. East Asia was a really good environment for rice. Now, various places in Europe were, as are Africa, but by and large, everyone thinks rice, you think East Asia. So, these cultures have this as their staple food product. You know, Native Americans had corn, the Incans had potatoes, Europe was a wheat, barley bunch of people with a little bit of rice and a lot of meat. And then East Asia's primarily rice is their core part of core element of their diet. Now, where am I getting at with all of this? I've just spent the past almost 10 minutes babbling on about food. Okay, that completely shapes the culture. The food you eat dictates your culture, because food is a big part of your culture. Now, what I'm wearing right here is leather. I'm wearing a leather vest. Now, a culture that doesn't have a lot of herding or a lot of animals, you know, you're not eating a lot of meat in it, you're not going to have a lot of leather. Or only rich people are going to wear this. Conversely, I would honestly say that Europe probably had a reasonable amount of leather wear in it. Same, honestly, with China, because they ate a fair amount of meat. You know, if you eat plenty of pork, or beef, or whatever, and I'm not trying to point out they ate it all the time or anything, but if you eat enough of it, leather is relatively inexpensive. Now, if you were to go to, say, the Incan Empire, I would imagine that leather isn't as common, if present at all. Because from what I can find, their primary meat source was various small birds, if they could get their hands on them, and alpacas and llamas. I believe specifically a llama. I might be mixing up my two domesticated South American animals. But I don't think they make very good leather. They make really good wool, though. So you'd have really nice, really good alpaca socks and alpaca ponchos and this nice little thing here. This is not actually made out of alpaca wool or anything, but it looks South American-ish, and I thought it was cool, and I like having satchels. I'm a satchel guy. So they'd make stuff like that, because that's what they had. Not this. They didn't have this. They might have, but it probably would have been far more rare, because honestly, again, I don't know if you can make leather out of alpacas. Maybe you can. Maybe it's very soft. Maybe it looks like really good gloves or something. I don't know. It's like lambskin. Soft stuff. But that's where you start going. Now you see where I'm going with this. It makes your clothing. It makes your armor. It makes all of this. Because if you go into, again, stick over with the Americas, because it's really prominent there. They actually had some fairly respectably sized, I guess, various powers. I can't really say kingdoms, because they weren't all kingdoms, but you know what I mean. Political entities. Now you get to the Aztecs and the Mayans and all of them. They didn't really have much in the way of armor. They had cloth armor. That's about as far as it ever got, because they were Stone Age. Being honest here, tech level, they're Stone Age. They never got into metal, except in art, which I always thought was weird. You got bronze art, but you don't have bronze spirits? I'm guessing just nobody ever thought of make a pointy bronze thing and put it on a stick. Seems strange to me, but I have several hundred years of hindsight, so I'm cheating. But there it is. The climate also dictated their culture. If you go to the Mayans, it's not a very nice place. They're not in a very nice part of Central America. It was a very hostile region, and the running theory as to why they were gone is just a massive drought killed them off. They were in a very precarious situation. Now, go up to the Mississippian culture up here in the Midwest. We don't know why they're gone. Because by all rights, they should have been fine. The theories go from plagues to droughts to internecine warfare to all sorts of things, but they covered a very massive section of territory just going off of cultural artifacts. It goes from Missouri all the way to the southern tip of Wisconsin, with several cultures that are probably very heavily related but not identical, or not specifically part of the Mississippian culture, all the way up to the Bay of Green Bay in Wisconsin and across the plains of central Illinois to the edge of Indiana. They cover an awful lot of territory, including trading all the way to the Rockies and all the way over to Tennessee. Now, that is a huge chunk of space, okay? That is massive. That's like half, distance-wise, that's like France trading with Poland. Now, that doesn't sound ridiculous, but you have to remember, they don't have horses. They don't have draft animals to speak of at this point, because they don't have horses at this time. Horses got reintroduced when the Spanish showed up again, because they killed off the horses by eating them. There's no camels. Again, extinct. Their draft animal is a dog. You can't ride a dog, so you have to walk. They're cheating, quotes, because they're using rivers with boats and canoes and things. But that's it. You are canoeing from the Mississippi River to the Rockies. Now I know I'm being all random and kind of scattershot on this informing cultures, but look what that was talking about there. The Mississippian culture just poofed at some point. Just poof, gone. We don't know why, but let's just place a bet on it. Drought. Well, it can happen in any culture you make. So how stable is your culture? What staple food are you eating, and how picky is it? Well, I can tell you right now, I'm fairly certain I can grow a potato in a bale of hay in my basement. Okay, these suckers aren't terribly picky about where they're grown. Corn, you can kind of BS your way through it. Rice is not. Rice is a little more touchy. Wheat is a little more touchy. Barley and rye are a little more touchy. They're cranky. So how drought resistant are you? How plague resistant are you? How bug resistant are you? Okay, well, that dictates what your culture's afraid of. So that'll dictate their gods. So what gods do you worship? Because you can see that in Uruk over in Babylon. All that fun stuff. They were terrified of a very angry sky god flooding their valley, because that happened fairly regularly, and it was very bad. Because we're talking massive flash floods, just poof, gone. Half their cities wiped away into nothing. There's shaping your culture here. This dictates all of that. So if you are a hunter-gatherer society, you're going to probably worship some sort of predator. You know, spitballing here, the cheetah. The cheetah is revered as your great god because he's the great hunter and he tackles down wildebeests and eats them, and it's really great, and you all look up to him. Okay, well, if the hunting's bad, someone's pissed off the cheetah. So maybe you should fix that. But that'll also dictate what they wear. So your great warriors will dress up like a cheetah, or they'll wear spots and have short slashing weapons, I would assume, or maybe short piercing weapons to mimic his teeth, if you want to go down that particular religious route. Of course, not all cultures do that, but it's ideas. These are ideas that you can use in your own thing. But the core of it is climate, big circle here, climate and geography dictate the smaller one, your culture. Because to give an example, you are not going to have an Arabian civilization form in Ireland. It's not going to happen. It's not going to look the same. You could literally pick up the people of Iran. Just here, pick up Persians. Persian culture. Pick a bunch of Persian people, plop them off in Newfoundland, Canada. Okay. They're going to keep some of their cultural trappings, obviously. But if we're talking in a medieval context, so this here is your primary weapon on the battlefield, their culture's not going to stay the same. Give it 100, 200 years, maybe even 300, they're going to be radically different than the culture they came out of if they do not have regular contact. And even if they have regular contact, they're still not going to be the same. You want to see that? Look at the Americas. You look at the American colonies and Great Britain. They were in regular contact with each other, but they slowly started drifting apart as time went on because they were in radically different areas with radically different needs and radically different diets, and then the cultures began to diverge because of the different things they had to deal with. This is what cultures are. They don't just form or spring full formed out of the ether. They can. You can do that. That is a thing you as a world creator can do because, to use D&D's example, Grumsh came down from the sky and slapped orcs and said orcs are going to act this way. I don't terribly like that because it feels heavy-handed and goofy, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense because, to continue using D&D as an example, the only reason the Drow haven't obliterated themselves is because Lolth doesn't let them. So yeah, you can have your gods get involved and make sure your society stays exactly the way you want it to. So that in the middle of the Siberian tundra, you have the Zulu Empire. Now, if I, as a player, walk up to this and I see that, I'm going to be curious as to what the hell's going on. Because you can do some really neat stuff with that, where this culture that makes no sense where it's sitting. For example, Zulu Empire in the middle of Siberia. Okay, I'm curious. How did that happen, and why are they there? Because you can think of all sorts of weird stuff. They could be brand new to this area of the world. They could have just got plopped in here through some giant magical portal thing. That'd be neat. Definitely be interesting. An isekai culture instead of an isekai person. I would thoroughly enjoy that, if it's done well. So please be interesting about that one. Now, to briefly touch on this, because I'm already going a little long-winded in my long, rambling shenaniganery about things, because I kind of went on a bit of a history blurb, because I find the Mississippian culture fascinating, because it's so weird. We know so little about it, and I just want to know more. Sorry, and again. But, to be brief, you can copy cultures, okay? To anyone who says, no, I don't want a bunch of Mongol ripoffs. Well, I'm sorry, but if I make a culture that exists in a similar place to Mongolia with similar resources to Mongolia, they're probably going to look a little bit like the Mongols. If only because, well, there's a reason the Mongols look the way they do. There's a reason why they have the armor and tactics and culture that they have. A lot of it is determined by their area. But now, do keep this in mind, a lot of that is also determined by their neighbors. So, if you were to say have the Mongols be neighbored by Ethiopia, let's go with that, to just really change things up, are they going to be the same as the Mongols that bordered China? No. To go with that particular historical conversation, the conflict would be against whatever native religion came up in the not Mongols, it's not the actual Mongols, and the not Ethiopians, which let's just Orthodox Christianity for the sake of this here. So that's going to be different than, say, Buddhist or Confucianist China dicking around with the particular native religion of not Mongolia. And that's going to change things. And that's the other thing you got to remember. Cultures don't exist in a vacuum. They kind of can for a while. China's done it, Japan's done it, various European countries have kind of done it, though generally for far shorter because they're literally sitting right next to their neighbor and they don't have much of an option. I'm pretty sure several African countries have tried to do it at various points. You can kind of do it, it doesn't work very well, and generally it bites you in the dick later. So, if you have a culture doing that, it's always interesting to see what's going on when they get culture shocked by someone else, but generally speaking, cultures talk to each other. Even if they hate each other. I mean, you could literally have one giant super state surrounded by small border states, and they could all just despise each other. But there is still, at the border, going to be cultural, quote, cross-contamination. I'm not actually going to call it cross-contamination because it's ridiculous, but you get the point. They're going to blend with each other because they're right next to each other. Unless you literally slaughter everyone who crosses the border by their way, there's going to be some bleed-through just because that's how this works. So, for example, Egypt talked to its neighbors. It talked to the kingdom of Kush to the south, who then talked to the kingdom of Aksum, which was to the southeast. They all talked to each other. They all had a little bit of bleeding through with each other. They may not necessarily have liked each other at various points throughout history, but they did talk, and there is influences with one another, even if it's not a direct influence. Let's just say, hey, there's a neighbor on the other side of one empire, and so it's kingdom here, empire here, kingdom here. Well, they're trading through the empire, they can still talk to each other. That's where you get weird stuff like that. That's where you get very interesting things going on. You can have a lot of fun with that. For how xenophobic or how not xenophobic or how xenophobic or cosmopolitan a given culture is. It makes everything really interesting because how melting potty are they? Or are they not a melting pot and more of a fruit salad where everything is still kind of blended, but you can tell what everything is, compared to a fondue where there's no way you can't pick out bits. It's all in there and just get over it. So, food for thought, in a very literal sense. Remember to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment below. Peace out, everybody.